Hello everybody, it's your residential brickologist LEGO Lee here with another throwback LEGO Star Wars The Clone Wars set review. Today we have set number 7680, the Twilight from summer 2008. This set came out to coincide with the release of the Star Wars Clone Wars film that came out in theaters in 2008, which of course that film spawned the beloved Star Wars The Clone Wars TV series that is a lot better than the film, I might add. This set used to retail for $99.99, where it was a Toys R Us limited edition exclusive set here in the United States. Now, to give y'all some perspective on that price, about $100 in 2008, adjusted for inflation here in 2023, is approximately $138, give or take a few cents here or there. This is a very large LEGO Star Wars set. It has 882 pieces, and unfortunately, I no longer have the box. However, I do have the instruction manuals. The first manual here has 75 pages of building, and the front gives us a look at what the box would look like. I love this classic Clone Wars art style, and the back of the manual showcases some other sets from this wave. I have the Magna Guard Starfighter built and ready to review. Look out for a video on that very soon. I also have this gunship. Unfortunately, I got that set literally in 2008, and it is in pieces. I regret destroying that. These other two sets I do not have, and they're kind of grails for my collection. Hopefully someday I'll get them, but I'm definitely going to have to splurge. Instruction manual numero dos here is a little bit shorter with a nice amount of 69 pages of building, and I wanted to showcase this very cool poster at the back looking at some of the sets from the winter wave in 2008, including the first ever LEGO Star Wars The Clone Wars set, which was Anakin's Jedi Starfighter. All 882 pieces build one giant ship, a little escape pod we'll take a close look at later, and of course a few minifigures you can kind of see poking through the cockpit there. I know everybody comes for LEGO figures, so let's look at them first. Our first minifigure here is the Clone Wars version of Anakin Skywalker that came in the aforementioned Jedi Starfighter set, which was 1/5 the price of this set, so nothing interesting or exclusive about this Anakin, and he frankly isn't worth that much either. He also has the extremely creepy cartoon Clone Wars style face that I don't like, and no details from the back, so really not a great fig. Snips, aka Ahsoka, is our second figure here, who was a very exciting character to get all the way back in 2008, and a lot of Ahsoka figures have gone on to be worth a lot of money. However, this version comes in a lot of other cheaper sets, doesn't have any detail from the back, but I do really like her head mold. That looks very good, but the face print again just looks completely off. Not a big fan of that weird cartoony style. R2-D2 is also included with this set, and thank God LEGO decided to change the way they made R2 figures. Now they mold R2's head in silver and it looks a lot better. It's very awkward looking here. It's like half the head is printed. Not exactly sure what's going on there. I don't think this old R2 figure holds up, and of course this character is so common across a bunch of other LEGO Star Wars sets, there's nothing to write home about here. Our final figure here is Rhoda the Hutt, and this is the most desirable figure in this set because Rhoda only ever came in two sets. This one and the 2008 ATTE, which was only $10 less than this set. Rhoda actually runs about $30 on aftermarket, so he's a pretty valuable little figure, if you want to even call him that. He's just one very small piece. His arms can be held by other figures. The printing for the eyes look good. It's a fun little mold, and he's actually the first ever Hutt character to get eye printing. The Jabba figures at this point in time did not have eye printing, and we didn't see Jabba with eye printing until 2012 in the Jabba's Palace set, so that kind of makes him a really unique little starting point for more detailed Hutts in the LEGO Star Wars catalog. Figures out of the way, we can focus on the Twilight itself, and right off the bat I'm going to say something maybe controversial, but I think most people will agree with me. This vehicle in the Star Wars universe is hideous. This is one of the ugliest ships Star Wars has ever created. It looks like the head of an AT-AT blown up to giant proportions mixed with the body of a B-Wing starfighter. It's like a weird Frankenstein's monster amalgamation of other Star Wars ships, and I frankly don't think it looks good. Now, keep in mind, that is not LEGO's fault. LEGO is given source material and they have to make the best LEGO set they can based off that source material. And frankly, I think LEGO actually did a bang up job with this thing, at least aesthetically, for the year 2008. However, I know a lot of LEGO Star Wars fans complain about this. This entire vehicle here, besides a couple little accents of like burnt orange and some miscolored Technic pieces, is all light gray and dark gray. I know people are so fed up with big gray Star Wars vehicles like Star Destroyers, last year's Justifier, etc. And this thing is the perfect example. It's the epitome of a giant gray Star Wars ship. And unfortunately, it's not a very cool shape. But again, I emphasize, LEGO had to make a set here based on the source material, and I think they did a pretty good job. Starting off with the cockpit here, there's actually a very cool mechanism to open said cockpit. You pull on these Technic pieces right here, and the whole thing opens. You can kind of see how it works with the piston piece. That was actually very clever. The cockpit also has this flap piece that you can open like that, which works out pretty well, and you can see your 3 minifigures seated inside, ample amount of room for them, which is fantastic, and I like the storage for their lightsabers off to the side. They're also kind of on this pedestal, which looks pretty good to me. However, I do feel like there could have been some storage space down here, maybe some additional seats, I don't know. It seems like wasted space, and that is going to be a theme throughout this review. Additionally, one thing I don't love is when you close up the cockpit and close this down, there is no windscreen piece. They basically proximize the windscreen by just having a gap here. Now that is something LEGO does to this day. The Indiana Jones car that came out in April 2023 also does not have a windscreen piece. They basically just leave a gap and let you fill in the gaps with your imagination. I don't love that. It's not a great precedent to me, and I would have preferred there actually be a window piece of some sort. Let's turn this Behemoth, I'm just going to call this thing a chonker for the rest of the review because frankly that's what it is, to the side. There's some cool details here and actually some decent snot techniques which look pretty good, and here is the aforementioned escape pod that simply just lifts off like so, and you can open it up like this, and you know what? It works out pretty well. It's not the most aesthetically pleasing escape I've ever seen. There are no controls on the inside, but it functions, and that's good enough for me. What's also good about this ship, frankly more than good, is the engine detail. This engine here is gigantic. It's using some big cylinder pieces and it looks fantastic. I absolutely love the dish piece inside here in transparent lime green. That gives this thing a pop of color, of course was already lacking, and that looks really, really cool from behind. There are a couple more smaller engines off to this side, and then you have this big landing platform on the back of the loading dock section of this vehicle. Now this is very, very plain. There's nothing on here, and it's rather loosely attached. I wish there's maybe a little bit more detail attaching these pieces to the rest of the build, but there are some pretty cool playability functions back here. Now it would have been cool to have maybe something to actually land on here because ships do land on this in the movie. It's not big enough to land like a Jedi Starfighter. Maybe a speeder bike of some sort could have landed on here, but there are some additional playability features. Like this door, which you can open like so, and see it's very, very loose. So if you drop it, unfortunately it falls, but LEGO actually came up with a really fun solution to this. Basically, this piece right here hooks into this Technic ball joint right here and actually holds it in place, which is so much fun. And additionally, there's a button on the top here that if you press on that button, it will close the door. But you also see a problem here. This tends to fall off super easy, which is a big issue. Inside here you get a little cabinet that has some of the tool pieces on it. There's like the oil dispenser on top of there, and the inside you get the power drill, which is nice. And then here is supposed to be a winch piece. Unfortunately, this set is 15 years old. LEGO string is kind of notoriously bad anyways. That LEGO string didn't make it the past decade and a half, so I don't have that anymore, but I think you guys can imagine how that would look. Behind there you also see a lot of empty open space, which you think would be storage for stuff, but nope, there is literally nothing inside there. Again, wasted space, and as we turn this thing around, you'll get a better look at what I'm talking about. Moving the vehicle to this side, orbiting this thing is quite hard because it's such a strange shape, but you do have this part right here. Now this thing is supposed to be down when it's in its landed position. You fold this up to put it into flight mode that I'll showcase a little bit later on in this review. Unfortunately, when that thing is up, there is a fat gap right there. That is a humongous gap. Don't love that, and I feel like that could have been avoided with just a few extra pieces. There also is the ability to open this up to reveal more interior. You have more tools and a spot for your R2 figure, and it also again showcases the giant void inside this vehicle. I feel like they easily could have just put like a plate in there, added some small controls, more storage, I don't know, something. Had to be able to like slide out from here. That could have worked because it would have been hard to access with the Technic frame of this ship. It's just very, very weird to me how empty the inside of this vehicle is. Tremendous waste of space. What isn't a waste of space here is the wing, which is quite large, one of the bigger wings I've ever seen on a play scale LEGO Star Wars set. And it is very heavy on the studs. No tiles or anything here, just dark gray studs, and it's definitely not the most aesthetically pleasing thing I've ever seen. It also kind of weighs down this build a lot, and we'll talk more about this gun design here. It's not the most sturdy thing I've seen, especially for a set that is old. Some of these pieces have kind of warped over time, and you can kind of see this thing leans a little bit weird in its landed position. Now, at the end of the wing, you do have the main blaster here, which can rotate 360 degrees, which is nice. And of course, if you know anything about LEGO Star Wars sets in this era, there had to be a flick fire missile of some sort, which you just flick on that and it will fire a missile. Now, unfortunately, the missile is the blaster, so if you fire a missile, you no longer have a blaster. I think it would have made a lot more sense to put the missiles like underneath here or something and actually had a mechanism to fire them, because manually flicking them ain't it in my opinion. So I'm not a huge fan of that, and this gun is just really comically small. Now we're really getting to the meat and potatoes of this build from a Technic mechanism standpoint. Holding this thing is a pain. There should have been some kind of handle because it's really awkward trying to pick this thing up, and it's going to be very difficult for me to showcase this thing from underneath. But this is the underside here. Don't love all the exposed blue pieces, but I do like the landing gear that can fold in like so, and also they use a very old and kind of rare Technic foot piece that actually works out pretty well. So those landing gear are very good for 2008. And then finally you have the probably main play feature of this set, which is extending the wing. So basically you have a little switch right here, and if you push on that, it kind of dislodges the wing from some Technic pieces I'll show off in just a second, and then you manually kind of have to pull this down. Once it's off this peg piece right here, it will kind of slowly go down by itself. Now this thing is very skinny, has some weird orange colors and a nice blaster at the end, but overall it gets the job done. And here is the Twilight in its flight mode. This thing is very hard to show off in this position. It is just so humongous, and without a display stand, there's no real way of me putting it on the ground, so I had to hold it with my hand. I don't love the edges of my light box being shown off here, but I gotta show you guys how this thing looks in flight mode, which is the most interesting position for this vehicle. Again though, just such a weird shape, and these wings are so skinny compared to how bulky the main vehicle is. I just don't love the look of this vehicle in general. Finally, there is this Technic assembly right there with the peg, and basically that locks this in place, which is actually very nice because when you put this thing in landing mode with it locked in place like so, it won't droop down, which is a pretty clever play feature. Alright everybody, final verdict here on the Twilight. You know how every single Star Wars property seems to have some sort of flagship? Like the Stinger Mantis is the flagship for the Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor games. The Millennium Falcon is obviously the flagship for the original Star Wars trilogy. You know, every single Star Wars property seems to have a flagship of some sort. And normally, the flagship is one of the coolest vehicles in the entire Star Wars universe. The Razor Crest is such a popular ship because that thing just looks cool. Obviously, the Ghost is a very popular vehicle that has become a really valuable LEGO set because that's the flagship of Star Wars Rebels. Oddly enough, the flagship of the 2008 Clone Wars movie and some of the earlier seasons of the Clone Wars animated show is this ship, the Twilight. And this thing is hideous. This is not a good looking ship. But like I said, that's not LEGO's fault. LEGO has to design something based on source material. And I think for the time period this set is from, LEGO did a pretty solid job. Now that being said, there are some flaws with this thing. I think the severe lack of an interior is the biggest one. Also, this thing is just so huge and awkward and hard to handle. That is something I don't particularly love as well. Additionally, there are just some design choices that don't really hold up here in 2023, but I can forgive those when I think about this set in the perspective that it came out in 2008. I think when this set came out all the way back in 2008, it actually was a pretty solid value for $100. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the review, $100 now here in 2023 from 2008 is about $140 if you round up. And this thing is comparable in size to a $140 set. Here it is next to the $140 ATTE from 2022. So I actually don't think the price was bad in 2008. Now, if you want to get this thing brand new sealed here in 2023, it's going to be over $300. And surprisingly, this is actually one of the cheaper sets from this original Clone Wars wave. That's probably because the figures aren't quite as desirable. And that's another flaw I have with this set is it has no exclusive figures, which is just very lame for a big LEGO Star Wars set. However, if you want to get this set used, it's only about half that price at approximately $150. So if you really like what you see, you can get this set used with the figures for essentially around the value it is adjusted for inflation. So I would recommend it if you're really into this vehicle and if you have a ton of nostalgia for the early seasons of the Clone Wars and the Clone Wars movie as well. So that's how I'd recommend this set. But for me personally, it doesn't quite do it for me, but I am happy to have it because of just weird nostalgic reasons, even though I still think this is one of the ugliest LEGO Star Wars sets ever made. I'm not going to give this set a completely negative review, but I can't give it a very positive rating either, so that's why this thing is going to get a 6 out of 10. Those are just my thoughts though. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Also, check out my description, find me on social media, support me on Patreon, and subscribe to this here YouTube channel. I've been LEGO Lee from Brickology Productions. Thank you so much for watching my review. Peace out, God bless. I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.